The bullied kid defends a new student, not realizing he's the son of the school's wealthiest donor. Alex Matthews stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, carefully examining the purple bruise forming below his left eye. Another gift from Chad Donovan and his crew of mindless followers. His fingers trembled as he dabbed at the tender skin with a damp paper towel, wincing at the sting. The bathroom door creaked open, and Alex quickly lowered his gaze, hunching his shoulders instinctively as if trying to disappear. 3 years at Westlake High had taught him the art of invisibility, a skill he'd nearly perfected until today. The late bell rang, its shrill sound reverberating off the tiled walls. Alex sighed, tossing the crumpled paper towel into the trash. Another tardy slip to add to his growing collection. Another disappointed look from Mr. Peterson. Another reason for his father to question why his son couldn't just man up and handle high school like everyone else. Outside, the hallway stretched empty and silent, a momentary reprieve from the usual chaos. Alex kept his head down as he navigated toward his history class, clutching his textbook tight against his chest like armor. The bruise throbbed with each step, a painful reminder of what happened when invisibility failed. It had been a simple mistake. He'd accidentally bumped into Chad while rounding the corner to his locker that morning. A small collision, barely enough to notice, but Chad Donovan never needed much of a reason. "Watch where you're going, freak," he'd snarled, shoving Alex hard against the lockers. Metal had bit into Alex's back as Chad's face loomed close, breath hot with anger and morning coffee. One push had escalated to a punch when Alex made a second mistake, looking Chad in the eye instead of offering the expected apology. The classroom door was closed when Alex reached it. Through the narrow window, he could see Mr. Peterson gesturing animatedly at the whiteboard, his students dutifully taking notes. Taking a deep breath, Alex knocked softly and entered, mumbling an apology as 27 pairs of eyes turned to stare. "Mr. Matthews," Mr. Peterson said, arms crossing over his chest. "So good of you to join us. I was just explaining the significance of the Treaty of Versailles." A few scattered snickers drifted through the room. Alex felt his cheeks burn as he slipped into his seat in the back row, trying to ignore the knowing smirks from Chad's friends. He opened his textbook to a random page, pretending to find his place while the lesson resumed. "As I was saying," Mr. Peterson continued, "the harsh conditions imposed by the treaty ultimately created the perfect breeding ground for—" He paused as the classroom door opened again. The principal, Dr. Morrison, stepped in, her tailored suit and perfect posture commanding immediate attention. Behind her stood a boy Alex had never seen before. Tall and lean with dark curly hair that fell across his forehead, the newcomer shifted uncomfortably under the collective gaze of the class. Despite wearing clothes that didn't stand out, just jeans and a simple gray hoodie, there was something about him that seemed out of place, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Peterson." "Dr. Morrison said, "I'd like to introduce a new addition to Westlake. This is Elijah Bennett. He's just moved here from Boston and will be joining your class." Mr. Peterson nodded, gesturing toward the only empty desk in the room, directly in front of Alex. "Welcome, Mr. Bennett. Please take a seat. We're discussing the aftermath of World War I. The new kid, Elijah, nodded without speaking and made his way down the aisle. Alex noticed how Elijah kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with the curious stares tracking his movement. It was a familiar strategy, one Alex had employed countless times. As Elijah settled into his seat, Alex caught a whiff of expensive cologne, subtle but distinct from the usual body spray that permeated the hallways. He watched as Elijah pulled out a worn notebook and a sleek pen that looked too expensive for a high school student. The contrast was odd, but Alex had long since learned not to judge based on appearances. Everyone had their secrets, their hidden depths beneath carefully constructed surfaces. The rest of the class passed in a blur of dates and treaties, Alex only half listening as he doodled absently in the margins of his notebook. When the bell finally rang, signaling lunch period, he gathered his things slowly, in no hurry to face the cafeteria gauntlet. By the time he looked up, Elijah was already gone, disappeared into the flood of students pouring into the hallway. The cafeteria hummed with the familiar cacophony of adolescent life. Laughter, arguments, the clatter of trays, and the underlying current of insecurity masked by bravado. Alex claimed his usual spot in the far corner, a table partially hidden behind a structural column. It wasn't much, but it offered a small barrier between him and the rest of the student body. He unwrapped the sandwich his mother had made that morning, peanut butter and banana on wheat, cut diagonally the way he'd liked it since kindergarten, and pulled out his dog-eared copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. He was 3 pages in when a shadow fell across his table. Looking up, Alex found Elijah standing there, lunch tray in hand, expression uncertain. "Mind if I sit here?" Elijah asked, his voice deeper than Alex expected, with a slight accent Alex couldn't place. "Everywhere else is..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Alex understood. Everywhere else meant navigating the invisible but rigid social boundaries that divided the cafeteria into territories as clearly as any map. "Sure," Alex said, shifting his backpack to make room. He expected Elijah to take the seat furthest from him, maintaining the buffer zone strangers typically established. Instead, Elijah settled directly across from him, setting down a tray containing what appeared to be the least appetizing option from the cafeteria's limited menu: a suspicious-looking meatloaf with congealed gravy. "I'm Elijah," he said, extending his hand across the table. The formality of the gesture caught Alex off guard. People their age didn't shake hands, they nodded, fist bumped, or simply ignored each other. Yet here was this new kid, arm outstretched, waiting. "Alex," he replied, accepting the handshake briefly before withdrawing his hand. "You really shouldn't have gotten the meatloaf. It's basically a science experiment." A small smile tugged at the corner of Elijah's mouth. Noted for future reference. "What would you recommend?" "Bring your lunch," Alex said, lifting a sandwich. "Or get the pizza on Fridays. It's the only edible thing they serve." Elijah nodded, poking skeptically at the brown mass on his plate. "So what's the deal with this place? Standard high school hierarchy? Who should I avoid?" Alex's gaze involuntarily drifted toward the center of the cafeteria, where Chad Donovan held court with his teammates and their girlfriends. "See the guy in the blue Letterman jacket? Shitri, Chad Donovan. Senior, football captain, unofficial king of Westlake, and professional asshole. Let me guess," Elijah said, following Alex's line of sight. "He's the one responsible for that." He gestured toward Alex's bruised eye. Alex's hand reflexively moved to cover the bruise, embarrassment heating his face. "It's nothing. Doesn't look like nothing." Before Alex could respond, a commotion erupted from the lunch line. A small freshman boy was scrambling to pick up the contents of his spilled tray, while several students laughed. Behind him stood one of Chad's friends, Tyler Ross, foot extended in the classic tripping position. "Original," Elijah muttered, shaking his head. Alex watched as the freshman gathered his scattered lunch, cheeks flaming red, eyes downcast. It was a scene he knew too well. The public humiliation, the desperate wish for the ground to open up and swallow you whole. Something in his chest tightened at the familiar sight. "Does anyone ever stand up to them?" Elijah asked quietly. Alex let out a humorless laugh. "Not if they want to survive until graduation." Elijah studied him for a long moment, those intense eyes seeming to look straight through Alex's carefully constructed walls. "Sometimes survival isn't enough, you know?" The words hung between them, simple yet weighted with meaning. Alex returned to his sandwich, unsure how to respond to such a direct challenge to the philosophy that had gotten him through 3 years of high school. Survival had been enough. It had to be. Their first week as unlikely lunch companions passed in a series of conversations that skirted the edges of friendship without fully committing. Elijah asked questions about teachers and classes, about the town, and what people did for fun. Alex answered, occasionally returning a question of his own, though Elijah had a talent for deflecting personal inquiries with vague responses or redirections. "Why did your family move here?" Alex asked on Thursday, genuinely curious about what would bring anyone to their unremarkable town voluntarily. Elijah shrugged, focus remaining on the apple he was meticulously cutting into perfectly even slices. "My father's work." "What does he do?" "Business," Elijah replied, offering a slice of apple across the table. "Investments, acquisitions, that sort of thing." Alex accepted the apple slice, noting how Elijah once again managed to answer without really answering. It should have been annoying, this evasiveness, but there was something refreshing about someone who didn't immediately dump their life story on the table. Everyone had the right to their secrets, after all. By Friday, Alex had grown accustomed to Elijah's presence, the way he always arrived at the table precisely 5 minutes after the lunch bell, how he never ate the cafeteria food after that first day, bringing instead simple but carefully packed lunches in containers that looked more suitable for an executive boardroom than a high school cafeteria. It was during that Friday lunch that everything changed. Alex had just finished explaining the convoluted plot of the school's upcoming theater production when he noticed Elijah's attention shift, his expression hardening as he looked past Alex's shoulder. Before Alex could turn to see what had captured his focus, a familiar voice cut through their conversation. "Well, if it isn't Freak Show Matthews and his new boyfriend," Chad Donovan drawled, flanked by Tyler and another teammate, Mike Russo. "You two make such a cute couple." Alex felt his shoulders tense, the old instinct to curl inward, to make himself smaller, kicking in automatically. He kept his eyes fixed on his half-eaten lunch, hoping that if he didn't engage, Chad would lose interest and move on to an easier target. "I don't think we've met," Elijah said calmly, setting down his water bottle. "I'm Elijah Bennett." The unexpected response drew Alex's gaze upward. Elijah had straightened in his seat, meeting Chad's stare with an unwavering one of his own. There was no fear in his posture, no submission in his tone, just a neutral acknowledgement that somehow carried an undercurrent of authority. Chad faltered momentarily before recovering his sneer. "Don't care who you are, new kid. Just letting you know you're sitting at the loser's table. Wouldn't want you ruining your reputation on your first week. I choose my own company," Elijah replied evenly, "and I'm quite satisfied with my choice." A flush crept up Chad's neck. "Whatever. Just know that hanging with this freak puts a target on your back too." "Interesting threat," Elijah said, his voice dropping slightly. "I wonder if your college recruiters would find it as fascinating as I do." Chad's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I assume someone hoping for an athletic scholarship would be careful about creating a documented pattern of harassment," Elijah continued, pulling out his phone and setting it on the table. "Especially in the age of social media and zero-tolerance policies." The implication hung in the air, clear as day. Alex watched in disbelief as uncertainty flickered across Chad's face, an expression he'd never seen on the bully before. "You threatening me?" Chad demanded, but the bluster in his voice had diminished. Elijah smiled, a small, controlled curve of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Just making an observation about potential consequences. I'm sure someone as intelligent as you can connect the dots." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Chad scoffed, attempting to salvage his dignity. "Whatever. You're not worth my time." He turned, gesturing for his friends to follow, and stalked away toward their usual table. Alex stared at Elijah, mouth slightly agape. "What was that?" Elijah calmly returned to his lunch. "Just setting some boundaries. You do realize he's going to make your life hell now, right?" "I doubt it," Elijah said with a strange confidence that Alex couldn't understand. Bullies like that operate on risk assessment. The potential cost just became too high for the reward. "How are you so—" Alex struggled to find the right word. "So what?" "Unafraid." Elijah considered this, his expression softening. "I've moved around a lot. Different schools, different countries even. You learn that people like Chad exist everywhere, just with different names and faces. But they all work the same way. They have power only when you give it to them." As they gathered their things at the end of lunch, Alex felt something shift between them, a deepening of what had begun as convenience and was now edging toward genuine friendship. Elijah Bennett was unlike anyone he'd ever met, carrying himself with a quiet confidence that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the petty politics of high school. "Hey," Elijah said as they reached the hallway intersection where they would part ways. Alex to calculus, Elijah to physics. "Want to hang out tomorrow? There's a bookstore downtown I wanted to check out." The invitation caught Alex by surprise. Outside of school interaction was an entirely different level of friendship, one he hadn't experienced since middle school when his former friends had decided his company might damage their social standing. "Sure," he heard himself say before doubt could intervene. "That sounds good." Elijah smiled, a real one this time, reaching his eyes and transforming his face. "Great. Meet you at the statue in the town square? Noon?" Alex nodded and they parted ways, the strange warmth of unexpected connection following him through the remainder of the day. Saturday dawned crisp and clear, autumn painting the trees in fiery hues of red and gold. Alex spent more time than usual selecting his outfit, settling finally on his least-worn jeans and a navy blue hoodie that his mother insisted brought out his eyes. He arrived at the town square 15 minutes early, too anxious to wait at home any longer, and sat on a bench facing the bronze statue of the town's founder. At precisely noon, Elijah appeared, walking with the same easy confidence he displayed at school. He wore a leather jacket that looked vintage but well-maintained, dark jeans, and boots that had definitely never seen the inside of a discount store. "You found it," Elijah said, as if there had been any doubt Alex would show up. "Hard to miss a giant statue of a guy on a horse," Alex replied, immediately regretting the sarcasm. But Elijah just laughed, a genuine sound that made Alex realize he'd never heard it before. The bookstore Elijah had mentioned turned out to be Blackwell's, a cramped, two-story establishment that had been in the same family for generations. Alex had passed it countless times but never ventured inside, intimidated by the intellectual aura it seemed to project. Inside, the store was a labyrinth of towering shelves, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and binding glue. A gray-haired woman with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from behind the counter, offering a small nod before returning to her book. "I heard they have a great classics section upstairs," Elijah said, already moving toward the narrow staircase. "And supposedly the best collection of first editions in 3 counties. Alex followed, curious about this side of Elijah. "You're into books?" "My mother was a literature professor," Elijah replied, trailing his fingers along the spines as they reached the second floor. "She used to say that books were portable magic, windows into other lives, other worlds." The past tense wasn't lost on Alex. "Was?" Elijah's hand paused on a leather-bound volume. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Alex said, the inadequacy of the phrase weighing on him. "That must have been tough." "It was," Elijah acknowledged quietly. "Still is sometimes." He pulled the book from the shelf, a collection of Keats' poetry, and thumbed through it with gentle reverence. This was her favorite poet. They spent hours exploring the store's hidden corners, discovering treasures tucked between ordinary paperbacks. Alex found himself sharing things he rarely discussed. His love for adventure novels, how he'd read the entire Harry Potter series 12 times, the way he sometimes wrote stories of his own, but never showed them to anyone. Elijah listened without judgment, asking questions that showed genuine interest. When hunger finally drove them from the bookstore, they wandered to a small cafe tucked between a hardware store and a tailor shop. Over sandwiches and 2 strong coffee, their conversation deepened. "So what's your story, Alex Matthews?" Elijah asked, leaning back in his chair. "Beyond being the guy who survived 3 years of Chad Donovan's attention?" Alex shrugged, uncomfortable with being the center of attention. "Not much to tell. Lived here my whole life. Mom works at the hospital, she's a nurse. Dad runs a construction company. I have a younger sister, Emma, who's basically perfect at everything. Classic middle-class American family. And where do you fit in that picture?" The question struck Alex as odd, specific in a way casual conversations usually weren't. "I don't know. I'm just so there, the quiet one. The one who doesn't cause trouble. But that's not who you are," Elijah said with surprising certainty. "That's who you've learned to be." Alex shifted in his seat, feeling suddenly exposed. "What about you? You know all about me now, but you're still a mystery." His small smile played at Elijah's lips. "Not much of a mystery. My father travels for work. After my mom died, he couldn't stay in Boston. Too many memories. So we started moving. This is the 3rd place we've lived in 2 years. That must make it hard to make friends," Alex observed. "You learn not to get too attached," Elijah agreed, something vulnerable flickering across his face before disappearing behind his usual composed expression. "But sometimes you meet people worth knowing, even if it's temporary." The sincerity in his voice made Alex's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Before he could respond, the cafe door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and 3 familiar figures, Chad, Tyler, and Mike, loud and taking up space in the way entitled athletes often did. Alex instinctively tensed, his body responding before his mind could catch up. Elijah noticed immediately, following his gaze to the counter where the 3 seniors were ordering, their backs to the dining area. "We can leave if you want," Elijah offered quietly. Pride warred with practicality in Alex's mind. Leaving meant letting them dictate his movements, giving them power even when they weren't actively targeting him. Staying meant risking confrontation, potentially ruining what had been a perfect afternoon. Before he could decide, Chad turned, scanning the cafe with casual disinterest until his gaze landed on their table. Recognition flashed across his face, followed quickly by the familiar smirk that had preceded countless painful encounters. "Well, look who it is," Chad announced loud enough for everyone in the small cafe to hear. "The freak and his bodyguard." Elijah's expression didn't change, but Alex noticed his hand tighten slightly around his coffee cup. "Let's just ignore them," Alex muttered. "They'll get bored eventually." "Ha ha, will they?" Elijah asked, eyes still fixed on Chad, who was now making his way toward their table. Tyler and Mike flanking him like enforcers. "Didn't expect to see you 2 lovebirds out in public," Chad said, stopping beside their table. "Usually freaks like you stay hidden in their basements." Alex kept his eyes on his half-eaten sandwich, willing his hands not to shake. Next to him, Elijah remained perfectly still, his posture relaxed despite the tension radiating through the air. "We're just trying to enjoy our lunch," Elijah said evenly. "I'm sure you can find something better to do with your Saturday." Chad laughed, a harsh sound devoid of genuine humor. "Actually, I think we found exactly what we want to do with our Saturday." He reached out suddenly, grabbing Alex's coffee and deliberately pouring it over the remains of his sandwich. "Oops, looks like you're done eating." Something snapped inside Alex, a thread of patience worn too thin perhaps, or a sudden realization that he was tired of being afraid. He stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. What is wrong with you?" he demanded, voice steadier than he felt. "What did I ever do to you that justifies 3 years of this?" The cafe had gone quiet, all eyes on their table. Chad seemed momentarily taken aback by the unexpected resistance before his expression hardened. "You exist, freak." "That's enough. Original." Alex shot back, echoing Elijah's comment from days before. "Is that really the best you can come up with? For someone who rules the school, your insults are pathetically unimaginative." Chad's face darkened and he stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over Alex. "You want to say that again?" "He doesn't need to," Elijah interjected, standing smoothly. "I think everyone heard him quite clearly the first time." Tyler moved forward, pushing into Elijah's space. "You should learn to mind your own business, new kid." "Alex is my friend," Elijah replied calmly. "That makes this my business." "Friend?" The word rang in Alex's ears, simple yet powerful. When was the last time someone had claimed him so openly, without hesitation or qualification? "You know what?" Chad said, turning his attention fully to Elijah now. "I've had enough of your attitude. You think you're so special because you talk fancy and wear expensive clothes? You're nothing here." Elijah's expression remained unchanged, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "And you think you're something because you can throw a ball and intimidate people smaller than you? That's not power, Chad. That's just pathetic insecurity dressed up as strength." The words hit with precision, striking at the heart of Chad's carefully constructed image. For a moment, naked rage contorted his features, and Alex was certain he was about to witness Elijah being physically assaulted. Instead, Chad laughed, the sound forced and hollow. "You don't know who you're messing with," he warned. "Actually," came a new voice from behind them. "I don't think you know who you're messing with." Alex turned to find the cafe owner, a burly man with tattoos covering his forearms, standing with arms crossed. "Problem here, gentlemen?" Chad hesitated, weighing his options. The cafe owner was well known in town, a former Marine with zero tolerance for troublemakers. "No problem," Chad finally muttered. "We were just leaving." "Good choice," the owner said, holding the door open pointedly. As Chad and his friends exited, Chad turned back, eyes locking with Alex's. "This isn't over, Matthews." The threat hung in the air as the door swung closed behind them. The cafe gradually returned to its normal hum of conversation as Alex sank back into his chair, adrenaline leaving his system in a rush that left him feeling hollow and shaky. "You okay?" Elijah asked, concern evident in his voice. Alex nodded, unable to find words immediately. The cafe owner approached their table, setting down fresh sandwiches and coffee. "On the house," he said gruffly. "Those kids have been trouble since middle school." "Thank you," Elijah replied while Alex managed a grateful nod. When they were alone again, Alex finally found his voice. "I've never stood up to him before." "You did well," Elijah said, something like pride coloring his tone. "Ha ha, Thorm. How does it feel?" Alex considered the question, probing his emotions like a tongue exploring a sore tooth. "Terrifying," he admitted. "But also, I don't know, like I can breathe better?" Elijah smiled, understanding without need for further explanation. "That's how it starts." "What?" "Taking back your power." They finished their replacement meals in comfortable silence, the afternoon stretching into early evening. When they finally parted ways at the town square where they'd met, something had fundamentally shifted between them and within Alex himself. "Same time next Saturday?" Elijah asked. Alex nodded, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee he'd consumed. "Yeah, I'd like that." Monday arrived with the inevitable dread that followed any weekend. Alex walked the school hallways with heightened awareness, half expecting Chad to materialize around every corner with retribution for the cafe incident. By lunchtime, when no ambush had occurred, he began to relax marginally. Elijah was already at their table when Alex arrived, a rarity that immediately put him on alert. "Everything okay?" Elijah looked up, his expression uncharacteristically troubled. "Not exactly. Have you checked your phone today?" Alex shook his head, pulling his ancient iPhone from his pocket. He rarely received messages worth checking, and the device spent most of its time forgotten in his backpack or pocket. The screen lit up to reveal 17 notifications, all from social media platforms he barely used. "What's going on?" he asked, thumbing through to find multiple tags and messages from classmates. "Chad's been busy," Elijah said grimly, sliding his own phone across the table. On the screen was an Instagram post from Chad's account. A crudely photoshopped image of Alex's face on a female body in a provocative pose, with a caption that read, "Matthew's finally embracing his true self. No wonder the new kid's interested. Hernanamon, Sermin, freaks are desperate." Alex felt the blood drain from his face, followed immediately by a hot rush of humiliation. The post had dozens of likes and comments, most laughing along with the cruel joke. His hands began to shake, and he set the phone down before he could drop it. "I'm sorry," Elijah said quietly. "I should have warned you earlier, but I only saw it this morning." "How many people have seen it?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible. Elijah hesitated. "It's been shared pretty widely. Not just at our school." The cafeteria suddenly felt too loud, too bright, too exposed. Alex could feel curious stares from neighboring tables, hear the whispers and snickers that seemed directed at him. The room began to spin slightly, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "I need to get out of here," he managed to say, standing abruptly. Elijah was on his feet in an instant, gathering both their belongings. "Let's go." They left the cafeteria, ignoring the raised eyebrows of the teacher monitoring the exit. Elijah led the way down the hallway, past the main office, and through a side door that opened onto a small courtyard used primarily by faculty during warmer months. In the chill of late autumn, it was deserted. Alex sank onto a stone bench, dropping his head into his hands. "I can't believe this is happening." Elijah sat beside him, close enough to offer support but not crowding. "We can report it. What he did is cyberbullying, and the school has policies against it." A humorless laugh escaped Alex. "Right. Like that will help. Chad's the star quarterback with a full ride to state next year. You think anyone's going to risk the championship over this? It's illegal, Alex, regardless of his status." "You don't get it," Alex said, frustration edging his voice. "This is how it works here. Chad gets away with everything because his dad is on the school board and his uncle is the football coach. The rules don't apply to people like him." Elijah was quiet for a moment, contemplating. "What if we could prove that the rules should apply to everyone equally?" "How?" "I'm not sure yet," Elijah admitted, "but there has to be a way to level the playing field." They sat in silence, the cold seeping through their clothes as the reality of their situation settled between them. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice smaller than he intended. "Why are you even friends with me? All I've done is drag you into my problems." Elijah turned to face him fully, his expression serious. "You haven't dragged me anywhere. I choose to be here." "But why? You could be friends with anyone. Why pick the school punching bag?" "Because when I sat down at your table that first day, you didn't ask who my father was or what kind of car I drive. You warned me about the meatloaf." A small smile touched Elijah's lips. "Do you know how rare that is? To be seen as just a person, not as a collection of advantages someone can use?" Alex frowned, confused by the strange emphasis. "Why would I care about your dad or your car?" Something like relief flickered across Elijah's face. "Exactly. That's why I'm your friend, Alex. Because you're real in a way most people aren't." The simple sincerity of the statement caught Alex off guard, warming him despite the chill in the air. Before he could respond, the side door opened and Mr. Peterson stepped out, surprise registering on his face when he spotted them. "Matthews, Bennett, shouldn't you two be in the cafeteria?" "Sorry, Mr. Peterson," Alex began, struggling for an excuse that wouldn't sound pathetic. Alex wasn't feeling well. Elijah interjected smoothly. "I thought some fresh air might help." Mr. Peterson's gaze lingered on Alex's face, something like understanding passing through his eyes. "I see. Well, the bell's about to ring. You should head to your next classes." As they gathered their things, Mr. Peterson added, "Matthews, a word?" Elijah hesitated, looking to Alex for guidance. "It's okay," Alex assured him. "I'll see you in English." Once Elijah had disappeared inside, Mr. Peterson sat on the bench, gesturing for Alex to join him. "I saw Chad's post," he said without preamble. Alex's stomach dropped. "Great. Even the teachers have seen it. I've reported it to administration," Mr. Peterson continued, "and I've contacted the IT department to have it removed from the school's network. But I wanted to check if you're okay." The unexpected concern left Alex momentarily speechless. I don't know, he answered honestly. Mr. Peterson nodded, his expression grim. What Chad did was wrong on multiple levels. It won't go unpunished, regardless of his status on the football team. No offense, Mr. Peterson, but I'll believe that when I see it. Fair enough, the teacher acknowledged. You have every reason to be skeptical. But things are changing around here, Alex. More than you might realize. Before Alex could ask what he meant, the bell rang, its shrill sound signaling the end of their conversation. Mr. Peterson stood, straightening his tweed jacket. If you need to talk, my door is always open. And Alex, don't let bullies define who you are. That power belongs only to you. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Alex kept his head down, focusing on making himself as invisible as possible, a skill he'd perfected over years of practice. Elijah, in contrast, walked beside him between classes with head held high, his presence a shield against the worst of the attention. By the final bell, Alex was emotionally exhausted, drained by the constant vigilance required to navigate the hostile environment. As they walked toward the student parking lot, Elijah broke their companionable silence. My father's throwing a charity gala this weekend, he said, the abrupt change of subject catching Alex by surprise. It's for the new children's wing at the hospital. I'm supposed to attend and I'm allowed to bring a guest. Alex blinked, trying to process the non sequitur. Okay, I'd like you to come with me, Elijah clarified. As my guest? Me? At a charity gala? The idea was so absurd that Alex almost laughed. I don't even own a suit. We can take care of that, Elijah said, as if acquiring formal wear was as simple as picking up milk from the grocery store. It would mean a lot to me if you came. Alex studied his friend's face, searching for any sign that this was an elaborate joke. Finding none, he sighed. Why? Why would you want me there? Because you're my friend, Elijah replied simply. And because I think it might help with our Chad problem. How could a charity event possibly help with Chad? A small, enigmatic smile played at Elijah's lips. Trust me? And despite the absurdity of the request, despite the wreckage of his social standing and the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring, Alex found that he did trust Elijah, more than he'd trusted anyone in years. Okay, he agreed. But if I embarrass myself by using the wrong fork or something, I'm blaming you. Elijah's smile widened into a genuine grin. Deal. Wednesday afternoon found them in an upscale men's boutique in the neighboring city, a place so intimidating that Alex hesitated at the doorway, suddenly conscious of his worn sneakers and faded jeans. I can't afford anything in here, he whispered as a sleek-looking salesman approached. My treat, Elijah replied, raising a hand to silence Alex's immediate protest. Consider it payment for 3 years' worth of social intelligence about Westlake High. Before Alex could argue further, the salesman reached them, greeting Elijah by name with surprising familiarity. Mr. Bennett, right on time. We have several options prepared for your friend, as requested. Alex shot Elijah a questioning look, which his friend pointedly ignored as they were led to a private fitting area in the back of the store. There, displayed on separate racks, were 3 complete outfit options, each more expensive looking than anything Alex had ever worn. I took the liberty of selecting pieces that complement your coloring and build. The salesman, Marcus, according to his nameplate, explained. Mr. Bennett provided your measurements, but we'll need to make some final adjustments. You gave them my measurements? Alex asked incredulously when Marcus stepped away to retrieve his tools. Hanya, how did you even know them? Elijah shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed for the first time since Alex had met him. I'm good at estimating, and I may have borrowed your jacket yesterday to double-check. The next hour passed in a blur of fabric swatches, tape measures, and terms Alex had never heard before. Super 150S wool, surgeon cuffs, Milanese buttonholes. By the time Marcus finished, Alex barely recognized the person staring back from the 3-way mirror. The navy blue suit fit him perfectly, highlighting shoulders he hadn't realized were broad, tapering to a waist that appeared slimmer than he'd thought. The subtle pattern in the fabric added dimension without being flashy, and the crisp white shirt made his eyes look bluer, more intense. What do you think? Elijah asked, appearing beside his reflection. Alex shook his head at a loss for words. I look like someone else. No, Elijah corrected gently. You look like yourself, just without the armor of invisibility you usually wear. The observation was so accurate that Alex felt momentarily exposed, as if Elijah had seen straight through to parts of himself he deliberately kept hidden. Thank you, he managed finally. I don't even know how to repay you. You don't need to, Elijah assured him. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When people look at you differently on Saturday night, and they will, remember that you were always this person. The suit doesn't make the man. It just lets others see what's already there. The wisdom in the statement struck Alex as beyond their years. Another glimpse of the old soul that seemed to reside behind Elijah's youthful exterior. He nodded, unable to find words adequate to respond. Marcus returned with boxes containing shoes, ties, and accessories, all selected to complement the suit. By the time they left the boutique, Alex's entire formal wardrobe had been arranged, down to the cufflinks that would be delivered to Elijah's house before Saturday. Speaking of your house, Alex said as they climbed into Elijah's car, a modest sedan that seemed at odds with the extravagance they just left behind. I just realized I've never been there. Where do you live? Elijah hesitated, hands stilling on the steering wheel. We're staying in a temporary place while our house is being renovated, he said after a moment. Nothing special. The evasiveness wasn't lost on Alex, but he chose not to press. Everyone had their secrets, their reasons for keeping certain parts of themselves private. If Elijah wasn't ready to share this particular aspect of his life, Alex could respect that. So what should I expect at this gala? He asked instead, changing the subject. I've never been to anything fancier than the winter formal sophomore year, and I spent that entire night hiding by the punch bowl. Relief flickered across Elijah's face at the shift in conversation. It's pretty straightforward. Dinner, speeches, silent auction, some dancing if you're into that. The main thing is the networking. People pretending to care about charity while really trying to impress each other with their connections and bank accounts. Sounds awful, Alex observed. Elijah laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. It is, mostly, but the money goes to a good cause, and some of the people are actually decent once you get past the social performance. Including your dad? Alex asked, curious about the man who had raised someone as unique as Elijah. A complicated expression crossed Elijah's face, fondness mixed with something harder to define. My father is intense, driven. After my mom died, he threw himself into work even more than before. But yes, he cares about making a difference. That part is real. They lapsed into comfortable silence as Elijah navigated the streets back toward their town. Alex watched the scenery blur past, mind spinning with the surreal turn his life had taken in just a few short weeks. From invisible target to friend of the most intriguing person he'd ever met, from social outcast to attendee at a charity gala, it was as if he'd stepped into someone else's story. Hey, Elijah said suddenly, breaking into his thoughts. Have you checked Instagram today? Alex winced, the memory of Chad's post still raw. No, I deleted the app. You might want to reinstall it. Elijah suggested, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Chad's post was removed, and his account has been suspended. Alex turned to stare at his friend. What? How? Remember when I said I was good with computers? Elijah's smile held a mischievous edge. Let's just say I submitted some very thorough evidence of harassment in terms of service violations to Instagram's support team, with timestamps and documentation going back several months. You didn't even know me several months ago, Alex pointed out. No, but the internet remembers everything. Chad's been doing this to other kids for years, leaving a nice digital trail that just needed someone to compile it properly. The realization of what Elijah had done, the time and effort he must have put into defending someone he barely knew, left Alex momentarily speechless. Thank you, he said finally, the words entirely inadequate for the gratitude he felt. Elijah shrugged, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Everyone deserves at least one person in their corner, Alex. The statement hung between them, simple yet profound. Alex turned to look out the window again, blinking back the unexpected moisture in his eyes. He couldn't remember the last time someone had fought for him so fiercely, had seen him as worth the effort of protection. It was a gift he had no idea how to repay. Saturday arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread that left Alex's stomach in knots. The suit hung on his closet door like a promise or a challenge. He wasn't sure which. His mother had nearly fainted when he'd explained where he was going and with whom, peppering him with questions about Elijah that he could only partially answer. He's new, Alex had said. We just get along. Now, as 7 o'clock approached, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, attempting to tame his unruly hair and silence the voice in his head that insisted he was about to make a fool of himself. The doorbell rang just as he was adjusting his tie for the 12th time. I'll get it, his mother called, her excitement palpable even through the closed bathroom door. Taking a deep breath, Alex gave his reflection one final critical assessment before heading downstairs. He found Elijah in the living room, looking completely at ease in a charcoal gray suit that made Alex's, expensive as it was, seem almost casual by comparison. He was engaged in animated conversation with Alex's parents, his natural charm evident in their relaxed postures and genuine smiles. "There he is," his father said, spotting Alex on the stairs. "Looking sharp, son." Elijah turned, and something like pride flickered across his face as he took in Alex's appearance. "Very sharp indeed," he agreed. "Ready to go?" Alex nodded, unable to find his voice as nerves threatened to overwhelm him. His mother fussed briefly with his collar before stepping back, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Have fun," she said, squeezing his arm. "And remember, I know, Mom, back by midnight." Outside, Alex expected to find the same modest sedan Elijah had driven earlier in the week. Instead, a sleek black town car waited at the curb, a uniformed driver standing at attention beside the rear door. "Your chariot awaits," Elijah said with a small smile, gesturing toward the vehicle. "You're kidding me," Alex muttered, glancing back at his house where his parents watched from the front window. "Is this really necessary?" "Unfortunately, yes. My father insists on certain appearances for events like this." As they settled into the luxurious back seat, Alex became increasingly aware that he was stepping into a world he knew nothing about. A world where teenage boys arrived at events in chauffeured cars and charity galas were regular occurrences rather than once-in-a-lifetime anomalies. "I should warn you," Elijah said as they pulled away from the curb. "People are going to ask how we know each other." "We're friends from school," Alex replied, confused by the concern. "That's the truth." Elijah's expression turned serious. "In this crowd, people rarely ask questions they don't already have theories about. They'll be curious why my father's son is friends with." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "With someone like me," Alex finished for him. "Someone who doesn't belong in your world." "That's not what I meant," Elijah protested. "It's just, these people make assumptions based on superficial things. I don't want you to be blindsided by their questions or comments." The warning only intensified Alex's anxiety, but he nodded his understanding. "I'll follow your lead." The venue for the gala was the Grand Meridian Hotel, a historic building in the heart of downtown that Alex had only ever seen from the outside. As their car joined the line of expensive vehicles disgorging elegantly dressed guests, the full magnitude of what he'd agreed to hit him with fresh force. "I can't do this," he whispered, panic rising in his chest. "I don't belong here." Elijah turned to him, expression unexpectedly fierce. "Yes, you can. And yes, you do. You belong anywhere I invite you, Alex. Remember that." The conviction in his voice steadied Alex slightly, enough that when the car door opened, he managed to exit without visibly trembling. They made their way up the grand staircase to the entrance, where a photographer captured each arriving party. Elijah handled this with practiced ease, placing a reassuring hand on Alex's shoulder as they posed briefly before moving inside. The ballroom took Alex's breath away, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in white linen, floral arrangements towering at the center of each, a string quartet playing softly from a corner stage. Waiters in formal attire circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while guests mingled in clusters of expensive fabric and glittering jewelry. "Elijah," a woman's voice called from their right. "There you are." Alex turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s approaching. Her silver-streaked dark hair swept into an elaborate updo that matched the sophistication of her emerald green gown. She embraced Elijah with genuine warmth before turning curious eyes to Alex. "And who is your friend?" she asked, her smile kind but assessing. "Mrs. Harrington, this is Alex Matthews," Elijah said smoothly. "Alex, this is Diane Harrington, the hospital board chair and the real force behind tonight's event." Alex extended his hand, relieved when it didn't visibly shake. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Harrington." "The pleasure is mine, Alex," she replied, her handshake firm. "Are you also a student at Westlake?" "Yes, ma'am. Elijah and I have history class together." "How wonderful." It's so nice to see Elijah making friends quickly. We were all concerned about him having to change schools in his senior year, but he seems to be adjusting beautifully. Alex nodded, unsure how to respond to information about Elijah's life that his friend had never directly shared. Before the silence could grow awkward, Mrs. Harrington continued, "Your mother works at the hospital, doesn't she? Nursing staff?" Surprise flashed through Alex at the connection. "Yes, she's in the emergency department." "Hannah Marie, how did you know?" "I make it a point to know everyone who contributes to the hospital's success," She said simply. Your mother is highly regarded by her colleagues. You must be very proud. I am, Alex agreed, a warmth spreading through his chest at the unexpected recognition of his mother's work. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a tall, distinguished-looking man, whose presence seemed to shift the energy of the immediate area. People turned subtly toward him, conversations pausing as he approached. Elijah, the man said, his voice deeper than Alex had expected. I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it. We're right on time, Father, Elijah replied, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly. May I introduce Alex Matthews? Alex, this is my father, Daniel Bennett. Daniel Bennett was not what Alex had imagined. Based on Elijah's few comments about his father, he had expected someone older, perhaps stern or intimidating. Instead, the man before him appeared to be in his early 40s, with the same dark curls as Elijah, though shot through with silver at the temples. His eyes, a penetrating blue unlike Elijah's warm brown, assessed Alex with unnerving thoroughness. Mr. Matthews, he said, extending his hand. I've heard a great deal about you. Alex shook the offered hand, fighting the urge to wipe his palm on his pants first. It's nice to meet you, sir. Elijah tells me you've been instrumental in helping him adjust to Westlake. Mr. Bennett continued, his tone conversational, but his gaze unwavering. I appreciate anyone who looks out for my son. The statement felt loaded, as if there were layers of meaning Alex couldn't quite access. Elijah's been a good friend to me too, he said carefully. Mr. Bennett's expression softened slightly. I'm glad to hear it. Friendship is a rare commodity these days. True friendship, that is. He turned to Elijah. The mayor's just arrived. I need you to join me in welcoming him. Elijah glanced at Alex, hesitation clear in his expression. I don't want to leave Alex alone. I'll be fine, Alex assured him, though the prospect of navigating the room without Elijah's guidance was terrifying. Go do what you need to do, Mrs. Harrington. Mr. Bennett said, turning to the woman who had been observing their interaction with interest. Perhaps you could introduce Alex to some of our younger guests? I believe the Prescott and Sullivan children are near the silent auction display. Of course, she agreed readily. Come along, Alex. Let's get you settled while Elijah handles his duties. As Elijah was led away by his father, he shot Alex an apologetic look over his shoulder. Alex tried to smile reassuringly, though his heart was racing at the prospect of being separated from the one person who made him feel like he belonged in this glittering world. Mrs. Harrington, true to her word, introduced him to a group of teenagers clustered near a display of auction items. They were polite if slightly distant, clearly curious about his connection to Elijah, but too well-mannered to ask directly. Alex found himself answering questions about school and his plans for college with increasing confidence, surprised to discover that beneath their polished exteriors, these children of privilege had many of the same concerns and interests as any other teenagers. He was explaining his interest in journalism to a girl named Madison when a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise of the ballroom, stopping his heart cold. Well, if it isn't Alex Matthews in a monkey suit, never thought I'd see the day. Alex turned slowly to find himself face-to-face with Chad Donovan, dressed in a tuxedo that somehow managed to look both expensive and ill-fitting on his athletic frame. Beside him stood an older man with the same square jaw and cold eyes, clearly his father. Chad, Alex acknowledged, fighting to keep his voice steady. I didn't expect to see you here. My father's company is a major donor to the hospital, Chad replied, gesturing to the man beside him. We never miss these events. The real question is what you're doing here. Did they need extra busboys? The casual cruelty of the comment was delivered with a smile, presumably for the benefit of the adults within earshot. Alex felt his face heat with humiliation, aware of Madison and the others watching the exchange with varying degrees of discomfort. Actually, came Elijah's voice as he materialized at Alex's side. Alex is here as my personal guest. Chad's expression flickered with surprise before settling into a smirk. Right, the new best friends. How touching. Mr. Donovan, Elijah said, addressing Chad's father directly. I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Elijah Bennett. Recognition dawned in the older man's eyes. Daniel Bennett's son? It's a pleasure to meet you. He extended his hand, which Elijah shook with perfect poise. This is my son, Chad. He and Alex are classmates at Westlake. Yes, I'm aware. Elijah replied, his tone pleasant but cool. Chad and I have had several memorable interactions at school. Something in Elijah's delivery caused Mr. Donovan to look more closely at his son. Is that so? Before Chad could respond, a chime sounded, signaling that dinner was about to be served. We should find our tables, Elijah said smoothly. Alex, we're seated with my father near the front. Relief flooded through Alex as they moved away from the Donovans. Elijah's hand a steady pressure at the small of his back, guiding him through the crowd. Thank you, he murmured when they were out of earshot. That could have gotten ugly. Chad wouldn't dare make a scene here, Elijah assured him. Too many important people watching, including now his father. The significance of the interaction wasn't lost on Alex. Somehow Elijah had managed to plant a seed of doubt in Mr. Donovan's mind about his son's behavior. A small victory perhaps, but satisfying nonetheless. Their table, as promised, was near the front of the room with an excellent view of the stage. Daniel Bennett was already seated, engaged in conversation with a distinguished-looking couple. He paused as they approached, rising slightly. Ah, here they are, he said, gesturing to the empty chairs beside him. Alex, please sit here on my left. Elijah, you know the Whitmores. Dinner passed in a blur of unfamiliar foods and complex social dynamics. Alex followed Elijah's lead on which fork to use when, relaxing gradually as the conversation flowed around him. Mr. Bennett, to his surprise, made efforts to include him, asking thoughtful questions about his interests and aspirations. Elijah mentions you're interested in journalism, he said as dessert was served. Any particular area of focus? Alex hesitated, unused to adults taking his career ambitions seriously. I'm drawn to investigative work, he admitted, uncovering stories that might otherwise go untold. Mr. Bennett nodded, something like approval in his expression. An admirable goal. The world needs more truth-tellers. He paused, studying Alex with that same penetrating gaze. You know, the foundation offers scholarships for promising students interested in communications and journalism. You should consider applying. The suggestion caught Alex off guard. Thank you, sir. I will. As coffee was served, Mr. Bennett excused himself to prepare for his speech. The moment he was out of earshot, Elijah leaned closer to Alex. See? Not as terrifying as you expected. Your father is, Alex struggled to find the right word, intense, but not in a bad way. Elijah smiled, a private expression that seemed tinged with both affection and complexity. He can be overwhelming at first, but he sees people clearly, their potential, their character. He wouldn't have suggested the scholarship if he didn't think you deserved it. Before Alex could respond, the lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight illuminated the podium on stage. Daniel Bennett stood at the microphone, commanding the room's attention without saying a word. Good evening, friends, he began, his voice resonant in the hushed space. Thank you for joining us tonight in support of the new children's wing at Westlake Memorial Hospital. What followed was one of the most compelling speeches Alex had ever heard. Personal without being sentimental, passionate without being overwrought. Mr. Bennett spoke of his late wife's work with children, of the need for specialized pediatric care in their community, of the difference this new wing would make for families facing medical crises. 3 years ago, he said, his voice softening, I lost the love of my life to a battle she fought with grace and courage until the very end. In those dark days, it was the compassion of healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, technicians, and staff that made an unbearable situation survivable for our family. Alex glanced at Elijah, whose eyes were fixed on his father, expression unreadable. He wondered how many times Elijah had heard this story told publicly, how it felt to have such a private grief shared as inspiration for others' generosity. Tonight, Mr. Bennett continued, we have the opportunity to ensure that other families facing their darkest hours will have not just medical expertise, but a space designed for healing, body and spirit. Your generosity will build walls, certainly, but more importantly, it will build hope. As applause filled the room at the conclusion of the speech, Alex found himself deeply moved. There was an authenticity to Daniel Bennett's words that transcended the typical charity appeal, a genuine belief in the power of community to effect change. The rest of the evening unfolded in a series of activities. The silent auction closing, a brief dance set by the live band that had replaced the string quartet, final networking over coffee and digestives. Through it all, Elijah remained at Alex's side, a steady presence in the unfamiliar territory. It was nearly 11 when Elijah suggested they step out for some air. They made their way to a terrace overlooking the hotel's meticulously landscaped gardens, the night air crisp with the promise of winter. So, Elijah said, leaning against the stone balustrade, what's the verdict? Was it as horrible as you feared? Alex laughed, the sound carrying in the quiet night. Not horrible at all, actually. Your father is not what I expected. In what way? He seems to really care. About the hospital, about people, It wasn't just for show. Elijah nodded, expression thoughtful. That's one thing I've always respected about him. His work matters to him beyond the bottom line. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. There's something I should tell you, Alex. The serious shift in his tone made Alex's heart skip. What is it? My father isn't just a donor to the hospital. He's... There you are, came Chad's voice, slicing through the moment. He stood in the doorway to the terrace, silhouetted against the light from inside. Having a little private moment? Alex tensed, instinctively moving closer to Elijah. What do you want, Chad? Just some fresh air, Chad replied, stepping fully onto the terrace. His movements were slightly unsteady, suggesting he'd found access to alcohol despite the event's careful monitoring of underage guests. And to satisfy my curiosity about what Westlake's newest rich kid sees in a nobody like you. Elijah straightened, his posture shifting subtly from relaxed to alert. I think you should go back inside, Chad. Or what? Chad challenged, moving closer. You'll call security? Have your daddy's goons throw me out? I'm not afraid of you or your family's money. This isn't the place for this conversation, Elijah said evenly. There are hundreds of people inside, including your father and mine. Chad laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet night. That's the difference between us, Bennett. I don't hide behind my dad's reputation. But Matthew's here? He's been hiding his whole life, too scared to stand up for himself, always looking for someone else to fight his battles. The accusation struck too close to home, igniting a spark of anger in Alex's chest. That's not true. No? Chad turned his focus fully on Alex now. Then why did you need the new kid to defend you? 3 years of taking whatever I dished out, and suddenly you find your spine when you've got backup? Leave him alone, Elijah warned, stepping forward. No, Alex said quietly, placing a restraining hand on Elijah's arm. He's right about one thing. I did hide. I let him and others like him make me feel worthless because it was easier than fighting back. Chad smirked, clearly believing he'd scored a point. At least you admit it. But he's wrong about why I'm standing up now, Alex continued, meeting Chad's gaze directly. It's not because I have backup. It's because I finally realized something important. What's that? Chad sneered. That you're the one who's afraid, Chad. You're terrified that if you don't keep pushing others down, someone might notice there's nothing special about you. No unique talents, no real accomplishments of your own, just your dad's money and a temporary status that will disappear the minute you graduate. The direct hit landed visibly, Chad's expression hardening into something dangerous. You think you know me? You don't know anything, Matthews. I know you spent 3 years making my life miserable because it made you feel powerful. Alex continued, a lifetime of suppressed words finally finding voice. But here's what I've learned recently. Real power isn't about intimidation or humiliation. It's about choice. And I choose not to be afraid of you anymore. For a moment, no one moved. The tension on the terrace was palpable, the night air charged with the possibility of violence. Then unexpectedly, the door opened again, revealing Mr. Bennett and Mr. Donovan in mid-conversation. Ah, here they are. Mr. Bennett said, his tone pleasant, but his eyes quickly assessing the situation. Chad, your father's been looking for you. I believe it's time for your family to depart. Mr. Donovan stepped forward, his expression hardening as he took in his son's slightly disheveled appearance. Chad, car, now. The command brooked no argument. Chad hesitated, clearly torn between obedience and saving face. Finally, with a muttered curse, he turned and pushed past the adults, disappearing into the ballroom. My apologies if my son was disturbing you. Mr. Donovan said stiffly. He seems to have forgotten his manners this evening. No harm done, Mr. Bennett replied smoothly. Boys will be boys after all. The platitude was delivered with such deliberate blandness that Alex caught the underlying message. Mr. Bennett didn't believe it for a second. Mr. Donovan nodded curtly and followed his son inside, leaving the three of them alone on the terrace. Everything all right out here? Mr. Bennett asked, his penetrating gaze moving from Elijah to Alex. Fine now, Elijah answered. Chad was just being Chad. I see. Mr. Bennett studied Alex with renewed interest. You handled yourself well, from what I observed. Standing your ground without escalating, that takes maturity. The unexpected praise warmed Alex from within. Thank you, sir. We should head back inside, Mr. Bennett continued. The event's winding down, and there are a few people I'd like you both to meet before we leave. As they followed him through the door, Elijah leaned close to whisper in Alex's ear. That was amazing. What you said to Chad, I've never seen him speechless before. Alex smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. It felt good to finally say it out loud. I think that's just the beginning. Elijah replied, a mysterious smile playing at his lips. Things are about to change for Chad Donovan, and for you. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching the usual mood of a school day. Alex dressed with more care than usual, the memory of Saturday night's confrontation with Chad giving him a strange confidence. Whatever backlash was coming, he would face it directly rather than cowering in anticipation. Elijah was waiting by Alex's locker when he arrived, looking completely at ease despite the curious glances from passing students. "Morning," he greeted. "Ready for the day?" Before Alex could respond, a commotion at the main entrance caught their attention. Dr. Rentorn Morrison, the principal, was walking rapidly down the hallway, accompanied by a man in a suit Alex didn't recognize, and surprisingly, Mr. Donovan. Their expressions were grave as they headed toward the administrative offices. What's going on? Alex wondered aloud. Elijah's smile held a hint of satisfaction. Remember when I said things were going to change? What did you do? Not me, Elijah corrected. You. Your words on the terrace made quite an impression on Mr. Donovan. Enough that he started asking questions about his son's behavior at school. Alex stared at his friend in disbelief. You can't be serious. Never more so. It seems Chad's father had no idea about the extent of his bullying. He was particularly disturbed by the Instagram incident. Before Alex could process this information, the first bell rang, sending students scurrying toward their classrooms. As they made their way to history, Alex noticed the absence of Chad and his usual entourage at their regular hallway hangout. Mr. Peterson's lecture on the Cold War passed in a blur, Alex's mind too preoccupied with the implications of what Elijah had shared to focus on international politics from decades ago. When the bell rang, Mr. Peterson called out, "Matthews Bennett, a moment, please." They approached his desk as the room emptied, curiosity evident in both their expressions. "I thought you should know," Mr. Peterson said quietly, "that Chad Donovan has been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. The administration is investigating multiple allegations of bullying and harassment." Alex blinked, stunned by the confirmation of Elijah's prediction. "Really? Really?" Mr. Peterson affirmed. "Several students have come forward with their own experiences after learning about the investigation. It seems your situation wasn't unique, Alex." "I had no idea," Alex admitted, though in retrospect, it made perfect sense. Chad's reign of terror had extended far beyond one convenient target. "Well, now everyone knows," Mr. Peterson said, something like pride in his expression as he looked between them. It took courage to break the silence. "You should be proud of yourself." As they left the classroom, Alex turned to Elijah, bewilderment evident in his expression. "How did you know this would happen?" Elijah shrugged, but his casual demeanor couldn't quite mask his satisfaction. "Let's just say I had faith that once the right people were made aware of the situation, they would do the right thing." "The right people meaning Chad's father?" "Among others," Elijah agreed cryptically. The day progressed with an increasingly surreal quality as news of Chad's suspension spread through the student body. By lunchtime, the cafeteria was abuzz with speculation and shared stories of past encounters with the suspended bully and his crew. Alex noticed several students nodding respectfully in his direction as he and Elijah made their way to their usual table. Acknowledgement of his role in the downfall of a common adversary. Their table, typically isolated, was soon joined by others. First Madison from the gala, then a sophomore named Ryan, who'd apparently been on the receiving end of Chad's attention earlier in the year. Gradually, their corner transformed from a refuge for outcasts to a gathering place for those who had found new courage in the shifting social landscape. "Is it true what they're saying?" Ryan asked midway through lunch. "That you told off Chad Donovan at some fancy party?" Alex felt his face heat with embarrassment. "I wouldn't call it telling him off. I just said some things that needed saying." "It was epic," Elijah interjected, a rare note of outright pride in his voice. Chad didn't know what hit him. The conversation flowed more easily after that, turning to upcoming exams and weekend plans. Alex found himself participating more than observing, offering opinions and even jokes that were received with genuine interest rather than the dismissal he'd grown accustomed to. It was as if a door had opened, allowing him to step into a version of high school he'd only witnessed from the outside. As they walked to their afternoon classes, Alex felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Not just the fear of Chad's retribution, but the heavier burden of isolation he'd carried for so long. "Thank you," he said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the hallway. Elijah turned, brow furrowed in confusion. For what? For seeing me, Alex replied simply. For sitting at my table that first day when you could have chosen anyone else. Understanding softened Elijah's expression. I didn't do anything special, Alex. I just recognized someone worth knowing. The words echoed between them, carrying the weight of truth that transcended their brief friendship. In that moment, Alex realized that the transformation he'd undergone wasn't about standing up to Chad, or attending a fancy gala, or even being noticed by his peers. It was about recognizing his own worth, independent of others' validation or perception. Still, he insisted, everything changed when you arrived. I changed. No, Elijah corrected gently. You were always this person, Alex. You just needed someone to remind you. As they continued down the hallway, matching their pace to the flow of students around them, Alex felt a sense of belonging he'd nearly forgotten was possible. Not because he'd suddenly become popular, or because his tormentor had been removed, but because he'd found the courage to be visible, to occupy his space in the world without apology or fear. There's still something you haven't told me, he said as they reached the point where their paths would diverge. That night on the terrace, before Chad interrupted, you were about to tell me something about your father. Elijah hesitated, an uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his features. It's not important right now. It seemed important then. It can wait, Elijah assured him. We have time. The bell rang, cutting off further discussion. Later then, Alex conceded, turning toward his classroom. You're not getting off that easily, Bennett. Elijah's laugh followed him down the corridor, a promise that whatever secrets remained between them would eventually come to light. Not as revelations that would change their friendship, but as layers that would deepen it. The remaining weeks before winter break passed in a blur of transformation. Chad's suspension became an expulsion after the disciplinary hearing, where multiple students testified about years of systematic bullying. The school board, facing potential legal action from several parents, instituted a comprehensive anti-bullying program to be implemented in the new year. For Alex, the changes were both external and internal. His social circle expanded cautiously, new acquaintances becoming tentative friends as shared classes and lunch conversations revealed common interests and compatible personalities. His parents noticed the shift in his demeanor, commenting on his improved posture and more frequent smiles. Through it all, Elijah remained a constant presence, supportive without being possessive, encouraging Alex's growing confidence while maintaining their core friendship. They spent weekends exploring bookstores and coffee shops, discussing everything from literature to philosophy with an ease that belied the brevity of their acquaintance. It was during one such outing, on the last Saturday before break, that Elijah finally addressed the question Alex had been patient enough not to press. My father's taking a position on the school board next semester, he said as they settled into a corner booth at their favorite cafe. He's been planning it since we moved here. Alex nodded, processing this new information. That explains why he was so interested in what was happening at Westlake. Partly, Elijah agreed, but there's more to it. The reason we moved to this specific town, the reason I transferred to Westlake specifically. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. My father's company is buying the land adjacent to the school. They're building a new tech campus that will partner with the district for internships and specialized programming. The pieces began to fall into place in Alex's mind. That's why you said Chad wouldn't dare make a scene at the gala. It wasn't just about his father being there. It was about yours. Elijah nodded, a hint of apology in his expression. My father is the donor the school's been talking about for months, the one funding the new STEM wing and the journalism lab. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me as just Elijah, not as the rich donor's son. The wealthy donor from the title, Alex said, the full circle of their story suddenly clear. That's why you were so evasive about where you lived and what your father did. I've spent my whole life being defined by my father's success, Elijah explained, his voice taking on an edge of frustration. At every new school, people either wanted to be my friend because of what they thought they could get from the connection, or they resented me automatically for having advantages they didn't. Alex considered this, trying to imagine how it would feel to be constantly evaluated based on someone else's achievements rather than his own merits. I get that, he said finally, but you didn't have to hide it from me. It wouldn't have changed anything. I know that now, Elijah acknowledged. I should have trusted you sooner, but old habits are hard to break, and I was enjoying being seen for myself for once. Understanding dawned fully, illuminating not just Elijah's reticence, but the deeper connection that had formed between them. They had each recognized in the other a kindred spirit, someone who knew what it meant to be unseen for who they truly were, albeit for very different reasons. "So," Alex said, a smile tugging at his lips, "does this mean I can stop pretending to be surprised when your car service picks us up after school?" Elijah laughed, relief evident in the sound. "You knew? I suspected. No normal teenager has a different friend of the family conveniently driving by every time we need a ride." They laughed together, the final barrier between them dissolving in the shared acknowledgement of truths they'd both sensed but left unspoken. As their conversation drifted to plans for the break and the new year beyond, Alex marveled at the journey that had brought him from isolation to connection in the span of a few short months. He thought back to that first day in the cafeteria, a bullied kid defending a new student, not realizing he was the son of the school's wealthiest donor. The irony wasn't lost on him, but neither was the deeper truth that circumstances might bring people together, but it was character that formed the bonds between them. In Elijah Bennett, he had found not just a defender or a benefactor, but a true friend who saw him clearly and valued what he saw. And in himself, he had discovered the courage that had always existed beneath the protective shell of invisibility. The strength to stand up, not just for others, but for his own right to be seen and heard. As winter light filtered through the cafe window, painting their table in gentle gold, Alex realized that the transformation he'd undergone wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Whatever challenges awaited in the new year, he would face them not as the frightened, invisible boy he'd been, but as the person he was always meant to become, seen, valued, and unafraid to claim his place in the world.